Welcome and good morning or good afternoon, everyone from wherever you are joining us today. My name is Paola Castañeda, and I'm an officer at ICLEI World Secretariat, and I will be your host and moderator for today. We are very excited to have you all here today in our webinar, How Can Cities Shift from Single Use to Reuse? This webinar under the Daring Cities Virtual Series 2025. In this session, we will hear about the just released City Practitioners Handbook, the Reuse Starter Kit for Food and Beverage, but also we will share some lessons from cities that are already reducing waste through innovative reuse initiatives with actionable strategies. We will also hear more insights from the Circular City Labs CCL project, testing reusable packaging systems in cities, implemented by the GIZ on behalf of the German Federal Minister of Economic Cooperation and Development, with ICLEI as a supporting partner. Before starting, I want to quickly go through the housekeeping rules and agenda. So for the housekeeping rules, this webinar is being recorded for future reference and will be available in the Circular's website. Please note that there will be a short Q&A session after the panel, but feel free to use the Q&A feature in Zoom and ask questions throughout the webinar. The speakers will be happy to answer your questions directly in the chat. You can also use the chat function for this. Finally, let's create a safe space to discuss freely and respect each other. So moving forward to the agenda for today, we will have an opening remarks on the CCL project by our colleague Angelina Schreiner from the GIZ. Then we will have the official launch of the City Practitioners Handbook, led by Dr. Magash Naidoo. Later, we will hear really good examples on the portfolio of reusable cups of events, a publication released by ICLEI Europe by Chiara Coluccia. And then finally, we'll have a small panel discussion with our three speakers of today. Lastly, we will have a short wrap-up and closure. So to start this session, I would like to give the word to Angelina Schreiner. She is an advisor on circular economy at the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, GIZ, with a background in international relations and public management. Angelina has over 5 years' experience in circular economy, including on topics of reuse and extended producer responsibility. She works closely with the municipality of Tirana and other partners to introduce local reusable packaging systems. So Angelina, welcome. We are really happy to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Paula, for the kind introduction, and sorry for having such a long name of my organization. Thank you very much. Good morning again, and good afternoon to all of you, wherever you are based, and thanks for the invitation and for the opportunity to introduce the Circular City Labs project to all of you today. Like Paula has mentioned, the project is implemented by GIZ on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, and we work in 4 partner countries and cities, namely Medellin in Colombia, in Tirana in Albania, in Tbilisi in Georgia, and in South Africa. And allow me to say a few words on what inspired us to conceptualize this project, with a focus on reuse on the one hand, and then on the collaboration with the municipalities on the other hand. As we're all aware of course, the impact of urbanization on climate change, reuse use, and on the environment is of course significant. And then on the other hand, municipalities as local authorities are really well placed to promote circular economy and waste prevention. And of course, local authorities can provide a level playing field for new circular business models to emerge, of course, we speak about reuse, but this could be also renting or leasing products or general take back and deposit refund systems. And with the Circular City Labs project, we prioritize the topic of waste prevention, especially in partner countries where often waste management systems are not fully in place yet. And yeah, we see that there's the potential for local governments to reduce litter in public spaces and save money for cleanups, waste collection and treatment.
Sorry, Angelina. As Angelina comes back and tell us more about the CCL project, then I will jump into the next part of the agenda today, which is this launch, the official launch of the City Practitioners Handbook. And to tell us more about, we have today Dr. Magash Naidoo. He is responsible for the strategic direction of ICLEI circular development work, overseeing key projects and fostering strategic relationships to bring about sustainable systemic change. So welcome, Magash. We are really happy and looking forward to hear more about the City Practitioners Handbook. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you, Paula. And I see Angelina has rejoined. So, Angelina, just for information, we'll switch your item and my item around so you can jump back in
Perfect.
after I
Please go
complete
ahead.
this. Great. So before we unveil the handbook and go into some of its contents, I just want to indicate that this handbook was developed with insights from the CCL project that Angelina was telling us about. But it also leverages knowledge from across the ICLEI network and beyond, drawing on real experiences of cities from around the world. So, huge thank you to Paula, who led writing the handbook, the reviewers and contributors from Ellen MacArthur Foundation, GIZ, and ICLEI. And with that, let's proceed to the unveiling of the handbook. So we jump to the next slide and hit the button twice. And voila. On behalf of ICLEI and the CCL project, I present to you the Reuse Starter Kit for Food and Beverages. Please scan the QR code to grab your copy. Now, unfortunately, we're not in person, so we can't sign your individual copy, but yeah, download it and keep it on your hard drive. So if we jump to the next slide, please. We spent most of the hours we had developing the handbook, so we didn't have much time left to design a nice presentation. And here we just use the actual images from the handbook to take you through what's in there. So the handbook follows a usual structure, beginning with contextualizing the challenges and some of the opportunities, of which there are many, that reuse provides. But it also goes into a little more detail to frame reuse within the broader circular economy transition. It then jumps straight into unpacking what reuse entails. And at the heart of the handbook is a three-step process for implementing reuse in cities. But here, I have to emphasize that the handbook is developed for cities that are specifically beginning their reuse initiatives. And it's developed as a point to start the journey from, while there is lots of data and insights underpinning this, which we can then share further if you need. Now, contact details will be shared further. But then the last part that rounds off the handbook is a presentation of case studies from around the world that essentially serves as inspiration and potential peers for us to exchange with, should you wish to take these initiatives further. So if we jump to the next slide, and while this is not the first part of the book, but it's the first substantive part, we thought a logical place to begin. This reuse chapter is to first illustrate what reuse is and is not. And this is because we often come across people broadly, some officials mixing up terminology. Often this terminology has very distinct meanings. So on this point, and to put it simply and plainly, reuse entails the repeated use of an item or product for its intended or designed purpose without modification. And this is a definition that comes to us from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We then also shared this chapter, at least, sheds a little light on reuse in the urban context. And this then builds up to the policy toolbox that ICLEI uses for the circular development work that's covered a little bit later. Towards the end of the chapter, and this has been informed by the almost 14 years that I have working within a city, I found that knowing the benefits of certain activities, especially new activities for a city, can help get buy-in from politicians and strategic city management. So here we present the benefits of reuse, and to make it easier to link these benefits to existing city priorities to get buy-in for these initiatives. If we jump to the next section, Paula, this is okay, the benefits section I was just talking about, and one more. Great, thank you. This is the heart of the handbook, I would say, and it's a 3-step process that could be iterative in nature that we suggest using. Naturally, there could be variations of this. So this is one part of it, and contained in this is a second heart, which is ICLEI's policy toolkit. So there are 3 steps to this. And if we jump to the next slide, the first step is what, and this is about determining scope, what we want to focus on, and validating that focus. So what we've done here is provided a conceptual overview of a value chain and listed 12 possible reuse interventions that could be implemented at different stages along a value chain to help city officials narrow their focus on what could be applicable and relevant for their specific context. It's important to note, though, that these 12 examples are not exhaustive. In the second table, you'll see these 12 examples being further described according to ease of implementation, because some interventions, require a lot of resources and time, and some not so much. So we've categorized this according to ease of implementation and the potential costs involved. Just with an eye to the time, we won't go necessarily into the details, but we then invite everybody to look at this, to download the handbook and look at this. Thereafter, the section on step 1, what, provides an overview of methodologies that could be utilized to assess the current situation in the city, which helps, or should help at least, with the decision on whether the reuse initiative you've chosen is relevant or not. So it's an important verification step. And these tools range from qualitative methodologies like the African Secretariat utilized in the Circular City Labs project for South Africa, or traditional tools like material flow analysis. Thereafter, and on the extreme right of the screen, we present ICLEI's policy toolbox that the circular development pathway utilizes. And this is essentially a collection of levers or tools that cities have in their direct control or direct sphere of influence to support, implement, or enhance reuse initiatives. So while there are multiple, or many rather, levers, we've limited this to 3 levers in each of the quadrants for this handbook, because again, we're trying to get cities started along this reuse journey. There's a lot more that we could share if you'd like to have a chat with any of the original teams or ourselves in addition to this. So each of these quadrants, which are regulatory and planning, economic, cooperation, and education, knowledge is further disaggregated. So for example, regulatory and planning talks about how to use policies and strategies and regulations to act as a lever to further reuse initiatives. But what's important to note is that you don't need to use all of the levers at the same time, or a lever from each of the quadrants. I think this is indicative to provide a basket of appropriate levers that you can draw from for your specific intervention within your context. So just with an eye to the time, and I know Paula is looking at the timer carefully, I can go a bit quicker. Let me jump to the next slide. And this is then on step 2, so the who. Again, what I've also observed while working in local government is that we need to focus on understanding, but understanding through consultation and collaboration with stakeholders. And this section is about just this. It's about identifying correct stakeholders. So we use, not just for this section, but for the guidebook more broadly, a systems thinking underpinning. And in this section, we highlight 3 types of stakeholders. The first being internal stakeholders, such as, again, for example, um, the billing office, which would be needed if incentives are provided for any taxpayers and if there's reduction in waste collection bills, for example, if reuse initiatives are being implemented in a specific business. And these types of stakeholders are very important to bring about the operationalization of reuse initiatives. The second are, general external stakeholders outside to city administration, with the first being internal to city administration. That will be important for the implementation of reuse initiatives. So, for example, grocery store owners would be critical when we start talking about banning single-use plastic bags at point of sale. And then the third type of key stakeholder are key stakeholders. And these are stakeholders that would be critical for the actual implementation, successful implementation and approval of the reuse activity. So, for example, if your reuse activity needs to go through the city council for approval, then it's not just your political representatives and councillors that become key stakeholders, but also kind of your political champion that would try and see this through. In this section, we also suggest utilizing a systems map to help with developing understanding of the entire context. It's quite a simple tool with 3 or 4 basic steps to utilize, and I find quite helpful when trying to frame something new that we're going into. So the systems map is often done in an iterative manner with stakeholders that seeks to continue unlocking unknown aspects for you to take into decision-making processes. So from a systems theory perspective, a comprehensive understanding cannot be held by one person. I know my partner will disagree with me on this because she always knows everything, but in this context, it's about tapping into the multiple insights that every stakeholder has, and this is what we're trying to unlock with suggesting the use of this map. The third step, if we jump to the next slide, is a simple template to help bring steps 1 and 2 together. So you can print this and write on it, or use the PDF editor. And this it's to essentially help you through a thought process to ensure that the appropriate reuse initiative has been identified, that it's been verified, and you've consulted with the right stakeholders, and you have a broad picture to take your reuse initiative forward. And it's not to be seen as a replacement for city processes. I would say it's more of a supplement to be undertaken before utilizing city standard operating procedures for policy development, for example, or other types of initiatives. And then the last big part of the book, if we jump to the next slide, is where we present case studies from around the world to act as inspiration. We won't go into too much of detail with this because Kira is going to take us through some of this, I guess, just after Angelina comes back online. And with that, I'd like to just bring the QR code back last time if you didn't get that. Yeah, if we jump to the next slide, I see the link is in the chat as well. So yeah, please download it, and we'd like to hear from you. So our email address is there, and yeah, look forward to the discussion in a little bit. Thanks, Paula. Over to you.
Thank you, Magash, for telling us more about the City Practitioner's Handbook. I'm sure this will be a really useful resource for cities that, as you mentioned, want to start implementing reusable solutions. So congratulations on launching it. So welcome back, Angelina. So we are really happy to have you back. So I want to give you back the word to you. So you were telling us more about the CCL project.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope it's better now with the mic. Okay,
Yes.
great. Good to hear.
Thank-
Okay, great. Just to recapture on my previous remarks, so we have the use of resources within cities at the one hand, but then also the opportunity to work with municipalities to set the framework for waste prevention on the other hand. And exactly on that thought, our objective of the project is based, namely that reusable packaging systems in cities reduce waste and then also greenhouse gases, while at the same time we also seek to empower women as environmentally friendly entrepreneurs. So we are taking action on different levels in each partner country and city. And first of all, we work with municipalities, with ICLEI as our partner, and different activities have been implemented, for example, training on reuse for municipality staff, but then also the development of replication guides, for example, for the city of Tirana and Tbilisi as well, tailored really to the municipality's interests. And also one of the reuse pilots is implemented within the city canteen. That's the case in Medellin in Colombia. And yeah, I already mentioned a pilot because that's exactly the other pillar that we're working on, which is the business case on reuse. So we implemented an accelerator program for businesses on reuse to learn about reuse. Someone mentioned before that the understanding is often not there. Some people think about recycling, and so it was really crucial to start working on this understanding on reuse, but then also developing business plans around the reusable packaging systems idea of our local businesses. And now currently we're piloting the most promising cases. Also, we had 2 training programs in leadership for women and men in the circular economy. And for all the activities, there is a special emphasis on female entrepreneurship and women empowerment. Yeah, so much for now to give you a bit of an overview on the project for you to understand also the context in which the ICLEI City Practitioners Handbook that Magash just presented has been developed. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelina, for setting the scene, and happy to have you back. Sorry and apologize for the technical issue. But I keep with me one part that you mentioned about the piloting. So when it comes to piloting, we know that there is no maybe better place to start testing a pilot than maybe a festival when it comes to reusable packaging. So I would like to introduce our next speaker, who will share some case studies from around the world that showcase how cities have been successfully integrating packaging reuse practices into events. So please welcome Chiara Coluccia. She is a circular economy expert at ICLEI Europe, focusing on plastics, packaging, and industrial urban symbiosis. She supports cities, regions in their transition by raising awareness, building evidence on circularity's benefit, and enable peer-to-peer collaboration. In the CCL project, she worked with Tbilisi City Hall in Georgia to empower city representatives to implement packaging reuse through training, co-creating a circular vision, and in providing guidance for event organizers. So welcome, Chiara. We are really happy to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paola. Thank you very much for this introduction, and happy to be here. I wanted to present to you this publication. If you could go to the next slide, please. Yes, perfect. Thank you. So this publication, exactly, as Angelina was saying, we've been working with cities, and she mentioned the support that we try to give to the city of Tirana and Tbilisi. And this publication was produced exactly within this context. They expressed interest in wanting to receive, let's say, more ad hoc guidance on how to implement packaging reuse at festivals and city events. And so we decided to collide 8 inspiring case studies from across the world, mostly in Europe, but you will see that there is also 2 cases in the USA. And we try to collide case studies that were using different policy levers to provide an array of different things that cities and regions can do to foster the uptake of packaging reuse, specifically in events. So you will see here is the QR code. You can feel free to scan it. It's also presented at the end of the presentation. Maybe now I will provide like a few snapshots of what each case study was about. So if we go to the next slide. So the first case study that we feature is Bolzano in Italy. And this case study was a rather, let's say, low effort, high impact case study, because it's about basically the provincial authority is providing to event organizers and local association a dishwasher together with dishware sets for rent. They had only to finance the acquisition of this dishwasher at the beginning of the project, which was in 2006. Initially, they had 4 only dishwasher and dishware sets, and then they saw an enormous uptake and demand from local associations, so they expanded this to, they doubled it to 8 in total. So the provincial authority basically just financed this in the beginning and then manages the booking system, which they said is around like 30 minutes of staff time per week. So it's a very low effort activity, because then the installation and maintenance of the dishwashers is done through an association, a social association. So the province has partnered with them. And let's say everything on site then is done by the event organizers. So this is an interesting case of how, let's say, a mobile dishwasher rental services can facilitate the reduction of plastics packaging creation, because then events are incentivized to acquire this. They also have discounted fees for the renting that are provided to events that fit this green events criteria that the province has set. So all in all, it tries to also tackle sustainability from other points of view. If we go to the next slide, then we have the case of Boulder in the United States. Boulder has tackled reuse through 2 different points. One is providing directly subsidies to businesses that want to basically adopt reusable containers for their events. And they provide up to $5,000, which in the end, they reported that for all the events, this was more than enough, because the majority of them needed around $800 to $1,200 to achieve, basically implement a reusable cup system or like reusable dishware system at their event. And Boulder also does this through an active collaboration with Hiccup, which is a service that provides these reusable cups that are used at races. And we thought this was an interesting case because you don't hear this often. Usually marathons, you see like these runners passing by and using the disposable cups, or Hiccup like provides these reusable cups for races all across the US. And so they have partnered with this specific company for the Boulderton, which is the marathon in Boulder. If we move to the next slide, I would like to present you the case of Bremen in Germany, which is very interesting because it has approached this through a legislation point of view, but also very data-grounded point of view. So first, the city in 2022 passed a motion mandating the use of reusable at all city events. But in order to make this possible, they have started with a piloting at the Breminale Festival, which is one of their flagship events, where basically they collected information from the festival organizers on how to set up this kind of reuse at events. And the Breminale started with cups a long time ago, but then in 2021, they also started piloting the reusable reusable dishes and cutlery. So to make everything reusable. And the city has basically collected information through the partnership with the University of Applied Sciences, as schematically collected information on this, and also used this information to create this reusable roadmap. That has been funded, like the project has been funded from the city. And so the University of Applied Science together, they had conducted LCA studies that basically facilitate an approach to deciding which reusable to use in the specific businesses or in specific contexts. Also considering, for instance, emissions coming from transportation connected to cleaning of the reusable. So it's a very data-grounded approach that the city of Bremen has taken in the reuse advance. If we move on, down there is the case of Ghent, which is one of our flagship case that we try to feature because Ghent has done this multi-phase and really overarching approach to reuse at events, which is backed in their Gänsefesten, which is their festival in the city, a 10 days event that attracts a lot of visitors in July. And they had started in 2014 by announcing a ban that then they implemented in 2018. So the city of Ghent announced this ban of all disposable cups, and then in 2021 they announced the ban for all disposable, in general, like single-use dishware. And this was, of course, then implemented at this Ghent festival. So at the same time, the city was also providing subsidies. So at the festival, the different festival zones, because it's such a big festival, there are 14 different zones. They provided subsidies every year for them to work together and implement a unified cup system. So the festival goers can go in any festival zone and return the same cup and the same deposit. They don't have to go back to the stand where they acquired this. And this basically facilitated a lot of higher return rates, because it was very convenient for visitors. Another key criteria was like the hiring of this CAP coordinator, specifically in 2024, when they provided this higher subsidy grant. They hired, like all the festival zones, they hired a specific CAP coordinator, which was supposed to coordinate everything logistics, all the receiving of the cups, cleaning operations, and also like the communication to the public. If we can move on to the next. Yes, Manchester. So then there is this other case, which is more, let's say, rooted in the vision and setting targets specifically. So Manchester has this ambition of eliminating all single-use plastics by 2024, which they achieved also through like implementing reuse at their city events. And when they acquired the cups for the city events, they also put this the possibility for event organizers in the city to get this for a free loan, with some paid for washing service as well. And then they used funding through a project to, let's say, generalize their learnings and create this guide for reusable cups, which is available to all event organizers on site. If we can move on. Then we have the next case, which is Munich. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Oktoberfest event, this large million visitors event. This has been a very ambitious initiative by the city of Munich already in 1991. So before circular economy was even something that we were thinking about. They decided through a commercial waste ordinance to basically ban all disposables on the Oktoberfest. And this was possible because the city owned the grounds where the event was held. So in the Oktoberfest, when you go in a festival tent, you get the traditional beer mugs or any other kind of drink containers that is reusable upon paying up on the faucet. And this basically is like how they implement within the beer tents the reuse system. But also in 2023, Munich has decided to go one step forward and also avoid the creation of packaging waste from plastic bottles, of water bottles, by providing free fresh water fountains outside of some of the locations. So next slide, please. Another case is the one of Seattle. This is more on the public-private partnership, because Seattle has basically worked on this Reuse Seattle initiative, which they do together with other actors. And by providing city grants specifically for businesses that adopt reusable, and also working with some events organizers on implementing reuse at their events. So for instance, there was this Zotunes concert series, which was piloting the initial efforts from Seattle in implementing reuse at the specific events, but now they also have planned to expand this to other locations, stadiums, concerts, venues, and also doing some tech-enabled bins in the city. Next slide, please. And I swear this is the last case study. Yes, it's Tallinn. So Tallinn basically was the 2023 European Green Capital. And on this occasion, they decided to take this event that they have, this youth song and dance festival, which is a very big event, and make it into their first zero waste event. And to do so, they adopted first a regulation that banned all the compostable dishes, but then they amended this and banned all single use. So that's enabling reusable as the only option. And then within this event specifically, they supported the logistics and they acquired directly the reusable dishware to be used within the event. So yeah, I mean, like as you can see, there is a lot of like diversity within the various cases of different things that cities and regions can do. But there are some key conclusions across all cases that we've seen, that there was also always some kind of strong policy or vision or regulation implemented by the city that was driving this action. There was some kind of financial or operational assistance that is needed to support events in pioneering this. And then always collaborating with different stakeholders and communicating with visitors became key. So I hope this provides like a little bit of a snapshot in different kinds of success models. And yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Chiara, for sharing these cases with us. I'm pretty sure this will serve as inspiration for many of the participants joining us today. So feel free to scan the QR code and download the publication. So next in our agenda is a short panel discussion. So I would like maybe Bruna, if you can stop sharing the screen so we can see all our speakers. So perfect. I would like to start asking some questions about framework and implementation. And I would like to start with you, Chiara. Looking at the cases that you just mentioned, for example, the case of Ghent, Munich, and Tallinn, what are the common success factors that stand out for making reuse systems at events successful?
Thanks, Paula. Yeah, so there is, let's say, a lot of different conditions that makes it into a success model. But the recurring ones was that there was always some kind of like city leadership or like city support and a policy framework. Whether this was like through specific regulation or city ordinances, or was more from like strategic objectives that the cities had. There was some kind of like clear political backing of implementing packaging reuse at events. And this is, let's say, the basis for them to start acting on the pilots and start acting on creating a reusable system and implementing like this culture of change. Within the specific events, there was, of course, the recurring theme on anyone that has implemented reuse at events was establishing a deposit return system, because otherwise people would just keep the cup, and this is not how we want to implement reuse. We want the cup to be reused as much as possible. So establishing some deposit fee for the visitors to pay is key. And this has to be adapted to the local context. There is no one specific amount that will fit any occasion. For instance, in Ghent, in Munich, and in Tallinn, I think like it was always €1. But in Manchester, in some of the events, they saw that the increasing from £1 to £2 increased the return rate. So you always have to test this out maybe 1 year and see how much return rate you get, and then maybe adjust the fee for the following year. Another key, absolutely key factor is collaborating with the stakeholders. And this has to start before implementing the pilots. Like you want to interview the event organizers, you want to interview the consumers, like the potential festival goers, the service providers. You want to know, like to map what is the local stakeholder situation, what are their needs in order to implement reuse, why might they be resistant, so that you can build a system that accounts for their potential challenges and doubts. And this is something that we've seen in Ghent, but we've also seen in Bremen, like where they conducted extensive interviews before they set up certain pilots. And then the last factor that I would mention, I would stop there, it's about communication to the public. So all cases, you need to have clear signage and communication and make the visitor understand why you're doing reuse. It's not just about like having deposit, but why like you want to reduce waste generated by that specific event or by that specific place. Business. And so having clear communication to the public, raising awareness is important to, let's say, foster this wider reuse culture within the city. And
Perfect.
I will stop there.
Perfect, Kiara. Thank you. So, building on that, Magash, I would like to ask you, the handbook outlines what, who, and how process. So, from your perspective, which do you think from these steps tends to be the most difficult for cities?
That's a good question, Paula. So I think the whole process is difficult. I know we have lots of city practitioners in the room, but if I would pick one, I would say the stakeholder buy-in and consultation aspect is a bit tricky. While we know collaboration is important, and we talked about briefly three different types of stakeholders, but at the same time, when we're instituting new solutions, like reuse does, it automatically works against existing businesses, supply chains, and so on and so forth. And this also then impacts a lot of workers and so on and so forth. So it's tricky trying to balance the needs of all residents. But all we can do is communicate and collaborate and then use these insights to try and minimize the negative impact. Sometimes there's no getting away from job losses in a particular, for example, single-use industry, if I could just very broadly use that term, when instituting something more sustainable, like a reuse solution. So I think this is potentially a difficult aspect to approach for cities, and keeping in mind, stakeholders always kind of remain the same in cities, if I could use this very broadly, because city administrations come and go every few years, and there's different priorities, and sometimes people don't see this. They just think the city is the city, and then there's trust issues and so on and so forth. So it's about overcoming this with sincerity for the benefit of sustainability at an urban level. I just want to add one more bonus challenge, or difficulty that I think when we talk about the implementation of like incentives at a policy toolbox level, sometimes this is very tricky because it's about the use of public funds, sometimes for people that already have a lot of money, as opposed to using public funds for the benefit of marginalized communities. So this could be another tricky aspect of the process. But I stopped there just with an eye to the time. Yeah.
Thank you, Magash. So then continue with Angelina. During the CCL pilots, the project faced also some challenges in stakeholder coordination. So what were the strategies that you find the most effective to bring together actors on board?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I think Chiara also mentioned it before, for a reusable packaging system to work, really different actors need to be on board and need to be supportive of the idea of introducing reuse. And in our case, not only the cities, but also GSZ and ICLEIs and also the local partners, support was therefore really decisive in bringing the relevant actors together. In my opinion, and also especially for countries or cities where reuse is a really innovative approach, it's essential to identify really motivated and well-connected actors. That could be the city, but also from the private sector or civil society, who are really convinced of the reuse idea, and then starting small scale. So for example, with pilots in neighborhoods or in closed environments like at festivals or in canteens, at cinemas, etc. And this will then help to collect first-hand experiences and to learn how to overcome these challenges. Kira also mentioned how to communicate with the citizens, with the users of the systems, and to generate relevant figures, for example, on the amount of prevented waste. And I think this knowledge will then help to convince also other, maybe more hesitant actors later on when the reuse system is to be scaled. Besides that, I think it's also relevant to keep in mind that each of the stakeholder groups has their own motivations and expectations towards the system, whether that be like financial motivation or maybe reputational or social or environmental. And I think this difference is to be kept in mind when approaching different stakeholder groups. And yeah, with Prevent Waste Alliance, which is a multi-stakeholder platform with a sub-working group on reuse, we offer a platform for exchange among exactly these kind of different stakeholder groups to hear each other's views and to jointly find solutions then, hopefully.
Thank you, Angelina. So moving on with some questions about regulation and incentives. Chiara, I would like to go back to you, and maybe you mentioned a little bit of contracts between the Munich Waste Ordinance and some incentives that the city of Boulder it's offering. So what do you think it's more feasible to cities to start adopting and when they are starting to introduce reuse systems at events and why? Do you think it would be like one or another or both at the same time?
Both at the same time. No, but yeah, there is also, okay. I mean, of course, there is not one solution fits all, and it depends on the context. We do have some pros and some cons, of course, with each of the approaches, like the carrot or the stick. So with the regulation, you basically create this clear binding rules that level the playing field, so all businesses have to abide by having reusable at their event or in their specific restaurant or cafe. So it's very, let's say, kind of easy to implement in a way, but then it needs to have political will and enforcement capacity. And if there is not clear, strong public support, strong regulation implemented out of the blue can face pushback. On the other side, the incentives models, of course, require some resources which not all cities have available. But they are like very beneficial in lowering the barriers for the early adopters. So they can, like help pilot systems and building capacities. The problem with the incentives is that, for instance, if they're left completely voluntary, the uptake of packaging reuse, then it can plummet, it can plateau, like the businesses might uptake it for the first few years, but then there is no further interest and it just stays as a piloted, like small initiative. It doesn't uptake in the whole city. So in the end, I would say for cities that are just starting, it's still better to have incentives than regulation, but a combined phased approach is the best. For me, the Ghent case, it's very exemplifying what this should look like. So you first announce that there's going to be an ordinance maybe coming 5 years from now. So the businesses can start knowing that they have to change their practices, they have to change their logistics, but not right away. At the same time, you implement the subsidies, you provide grants for businesses to adapt, for events to do reusable testing. And then after this, you implement the ordinance and you phase out the subsidies. So having both combined can help really businesses not only to be prepared for this, but also to learn, like while the subsidies are still in place, to learn and fine tune the system. So then when the ordinance come, they are like completely equipped to basically do this according to the law.
Perfect. Thank you for your answer, Kira. And building on that, Magash, I know that the city's practitioner handbook is showcasing the policy toolbox, which emphasizes on regulatory, economic, cooperation, and educational levels. Chiara already shared with us some of the regulation and economic part. And I would like to ask you, which of these do you think that cities underutilize and how they can strengthen the use?
Tricky question, Paula, but a good question nevertheless. I think it depends where in the world you go. I think some cities in certain regions tend to, get drawn to some solutions. For example, just to illustrate the point, I think cities that have better access to financial resources would utilize financial incentives and better place to use these economic levers, to leverage and stimulate reuse. And the same could be said for university cities or towns, no? that there's often a very close working relationship between the universities and cities, and sometimes solutions could start and even be implemented on campuses. So I think it's very much dependent. But speaking from a global perspective and perhaps what we see, I think we have a quadrant on education and so on and so forth. And this, I think, could be utilized, well, it's not utilized as much. It goes down the activities on, awareness raising campaigns and behavioral change processes and so on and so forth. I think it comes down to a question of, do we think from a sustainable consumption perspective, or do we just think that convenience is important when we make these decisions? So I think definitely the education part could be utilized more, and focusing specifically on youth, so that these sustainable kind of thoughts and behaviors are installed. So this is when the city needs to also collaborate with the relevant stakeholders that control these spaces within the city. But yeah, with that, I give you the mic back, Paula.
Thank you, Magash. And then I would like to ask you, Angelina, from the CCL project perspective, how did the municipalities help to support and join these reuse pilots on their mission? If you can share with us.
Yes, sure. Thanks, Paula. Yeah, I agree. The role of the city administration can be really multifaceted, and that's exactly what we see within our partner cities, within the Circular City Labs project. And I'll give you two examples, one from Medellin and one from Tirana. So in Colombia and Medellin, the mayor's office supports our pilot, the Ciclo company, and its founder, Ana Maria Villages, in testing her reuse system, including also the technical solutions and the tracking of return rate in the City Hall's main building. And also the Environment Secretariat there coordinates with relevant departments to really ease the new systems implementation. And also the city will assess the feasibility of including reuse criteria in the procurement guidelines of the City Hall's catering and restaurant operators. And yeah, this really aims then to anchor reuse permanently and to not have it only as like pilot phase. So this is great. And also in Tirana, Albania, the municipality has supported Circular City Labs reuse journey since the beginning. For instance, just by informing relevant businesses on the opportunities of reuse, and also our accelerator program, therefore already sending like a very strong political signal. And also together with ICLEI, the municipality assesses now the options for introducing reuse at its public events. And for example, for our pilot project, the Barefoot Festival that is also supported by TOC, the municipality provided support in the form of event permits and access to public spaces. So this allowed really the pilot to take place within an official urban framework.
Thank you, Angelina. Due to the time, I will ask one more round of questions, and then I will ask you if you can join in, like if you can bear with us 5 more minutes to close this session. So for the barriers and enables, Chiara, there is 2 questions, one for barriers and enables, and the last one, if you can give an advice about like to a city that is just starting its reuse journey. So what would be the advice? But the question on barriers and enables is the cases you presented, they were talking about hygiene and logistics, and they were like kind of like recurring barriers across all the case studies. So how did the event organizers overcome these different barriers? If you could share with us.
Sure, and this is a good question. It is indeed like both of them are some of the most recurring challenges. There is different approaches. I will try to be brief. I would say, so first of all, having centralized washing facilities really help. Also with managing the turnover of like the reusable during events like that have a lot of visitors. And if this are, of course, need to be managed like by professionals. So of course helps addressing the hygiene. There's also, for instance, one interesting Bremen, like the way that they managed the site plan was that they clearly marked and separated the collection, the return stations from the food stands. So they will like the dirty dishware would not come in contact within the food preparing area. And this really helps, like the marking, the different areas. So having a clear site plan and clearly marked and separated return points for visitors to know where they have to go. And one interesting thing is you want to have some train your staff on this. So all event organizer had to had sessions with the vendors and with the staff or volunteers at the event, and to train them basically on how to handle the returned dishware, how to direct the different visitors, give information. So whether this is through volunteers or specific staff, you need to have some pre-event training sessions for this.
Perfect. And just a final thought, and what would be your advice for a city that is starting its 3 years journey?
A lot. There's a lot of things to consider, but also to not get scared from the scale. Test this in advance, testing in small contained pilots that help you gather feedback and information on how to implement the reuse, and also have high potential for reducing waste generated. So start from small events, set clear targets and monitor this throughout. Collaborate with stakeholders before, during, and after. Send questionnaires afterwards. I would say this is a lot of advice wrapped into one, but let's say the main thing is to not get scared by the scale of this, because in the end, it's just it's a very easy implementable change that has a high impact on the waste generated by the city. And even if there are a lot of costs maybe associated at the beginning, there is also a lot of savings with reducing waste management logistics costs. So this is something that cities can approach fairly easily.
Perfect. Thank you, Chiara. And then Magash, I would like to ask you from the handbook's perspective, what guidance can cities then use to address maybe the hygiene and cost concerns early on? And also, as if you can share really briefly, what would be your advice for cities that are starting its journey in the reusable systems?
Thanks, Paula. So I completely understand the concern on hygiene. I mean, I was carrying around hand sanitizer long after COVID ended as well. So I completely get it, right? And I think here there are a few points from a city perspective. One, I think education is key, so that people are informed on what the processes are for those reuse solutions where a container or a cup needs to be collected and it goes to some magical place and then just appears clean. So they need to understand what's at the back end and there's proper facilities. And I think the service providers that are engaged need to undertake these processes. They need to be reputable service providers to undertake these processes, without cutting corners and then funds. Visual stimuli is important. I know we're trying to get away from single use here, but just as an example, once the cup is reused, it could have a little sticker on it to say, yes, I'm being sanitized or something like this, to indicate, and forego these types of concerns. But at policy level, I think the regulations on how these solutions could be managed could be very helpful for cities to specify, particularly, for example, how cups or containers could be transported after it's sanitized and washed back to point of use. You mentioned a second question, Paula. Sorry, I think I missed it. But maybe with an eye to the time, I leave it there. And then,
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Magash. And then finally, Angelina, from your perspective on the CCL projects, I want to ask you if the projects faced similar barriers as the ones mentioned, and how were they addressed on the ground?
Yes, indeed, our pilot businesses or projects face various challenges, including those that were mentioned, maybe also now touching upon some other topics as well. First of all, and given the short time frame in which the pilots were have been implemented, there was relatively short time for purchasing equipment and machineries like dishwashers, for example, or the reusable cups, or also the special machines for filling reusable beer bottles in another case, just to mention a few examples. So whenever possible, providers with short delivery times were chosen, but this is really to be kept in mind that sometimes special machine, dishwasher, whatever, is just taking some time. So if you're planning like a festival, consider that when you purchase a new dishwasher, or you use a used one, that's maybe even better. Another challenge is also in some contexts the low awareness of citizens, and two pilots, reusable cups that were distributed without a deposit, experienced really low return rates, and pilots are now working on an improved communication strategy, and B, of course, also deposit models to increase the return rate. And now from a business perspective and looking now into the post-pilot phase, the question of viable business models for the reuse system becomes also very important again. And yeah, we are hoping therefore that our partner municipalities create the right framework conditions to make reuse an attractive, if not the only option, for example, for public events.
Thank you, Angelina, and thank you, Chiara and Magash, for answering all my questions. I saw that you already answered some of the questions in the chat, and due to the time constraint, I will continue to close up this webinar. So first, I would like to also remind you that you can find more information on the CCL projects in the CCL webpage. You can use the first QR code. You can find information about the projects, other past events, past webinars, and also some other baseline publications and other publications throughout this project. So also on the second QR code, you can subscribe to the circular newsletter, so where you can find also updated details on the CCL project, but also some other tools for the circular economy in cities as well. So finally, I would like to thank you all for your participation, but especially for our speakers today, Angelina, Chiara, Magash. Thank you for joining us today. Your contributions were really appreciated. I'm really sure, and I'm sure that there will be like more questions coming up, because this is reusable packaging systems is there has a lot of way also to explore and to implement, to monitor and scale for the future. But with that said, lastly, I would like to invite you for the next Day in Cities sessions. So you can, yeah. So the first session, it's happening on next week, on Thursday next week, and this first session offers practical guidance for municipalities looking to design more socially just climate subsidy programs. And the second session at 6 p.m. Offers insights on how local and regional governments are using innovative technologies to plan, implement, and manage effective climate actions. So with that said, thank you all for your attention. Thank you for your patience also with the technical issues. And I wish you all a nice rest of the day, and take care.
Thanks, Paula. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Paula.